Hi. In this video, we're going to be showing you how to go through and determine the path to a file, or the file path in R. And there's a whole video for this because it turns out this is a frustratingly difficult topic because it sounds so easy, but it turns out we all have different operating systems. Even like your specific way of naming folders can cause problems. Sometimes files have characters in them that make it difficult to refer to their names. There's a lot of reasons why this ends up being more difficult than it sounds like it should be. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that when it happens, it means that you can't even start on a project because your whole goal is to work on a file. Well, if you can't load that data, you can't tell R how to find that data, you can't get started. And so we wanted to make a video that would really help supplement that. So the goal here is to give you a couple of tools that get rid of that frustration, that really help scaffold your ability to do this no matter what operating system you're on or how difficult that particular file is to refer to. So let's get started. I just want to quickly demonstrate how to read my current directory and what that means. So one thing to note is that R does print your current directory at this top left corner of the console. Let me expand my source so this is a little bit more of a typical view for you. But at the top left of my console, it says ~/ And that doesn't mean much to you, but to me, that lets me know that I am currently in my working directory. So the working directory is the place on your computer where the default position is established when you first load R. Now your working directory is wherever that gets changed to. And so we can change our working directory, and that changes kind of the relative position of objects according to R. So for example, for my current directory, so let's say I want to read a CSV file. So the first argument of read.csv is the name of the file. So now I need to tell it the name in which the file exists. The problem is I may not know where it's located. And if it's in my working directory, it's very easy. There is no further information I need to pass it. I don't need to tell it, go inside of this directory or start at a different position and then go into some directories. When it's in your working directory, you can just call it its name because there is no additional path. It's just the name of the file. So this works. The problem is, what if that gets moved? So I'm going to move this into my R folder. Okay, so it's no longer there. If I try to run this, I get this message. Get very familiar with this message. Every time you mess up these paths, this is the message you'll see. It's a very, very common issue. The way that we can refer to this is to start with a period. The period says, all right, starting from my current position. And then I'm going to go into a directory. So the directories start with a /. I'm going to go into R. It's a directory, so I'm going to end it with a /. And then I'm going to go to that name. Now, something you're not seeing is that with my fingers, I'm typing a tab. And so let me restart that just so you can hear me go through this as well. So I type a dot and nothing happens. I type a / because I know I'm going to try to go into a directory inside of my current directory, and nothing happens. But now I'm going to press tab. And when I do that, it populates a list of all the options. I'll tell you sometimes if you have a lot of options, that will take a minute to load. But that's the idea, is it pops up the list of options. I'm going to press tab again because I really like using tab because I'm a horrible typist. Now that it's within R, it's telling me, all right, here are all the contents of that directory. And again, I can kind of scroll through and select the thing I want. And again, I'm going to press tab because I'm a bad typist. So when I do that, it's no longer popping up anything. If I press tab, that's the sound of me pressing tab, nothing pops up. And that's because I've reached the end of all the options. There is no other suggestions RStudio to make. And that makes sense because that's the only file with anything close to that name in it. And now I can read it now. Cool. So there you go. That's like the way I typically do it, including like all that tab nonsense. That's the logic I go through each time. If I'm already at a location that is deeper, so let's say I am in my, no, I can't go to my videos. I am in my Zoom. Okay, I can go into Zoom. And I change my working directory to that. So I set as my working directory. There is no longer a file called R. I actually have to back up. And so there's a shorthand for backing up that kind of goes up one level. And that's ... So that means I've gone up one level, and there's R. I can kind of tab through this. And all the rest of this is just repeated, so I just deleted it. But here we go. It works. Cool. So that's how I do it. But that, I got to tell you, that's not the typical way when you're first starting out. It becomes very difficult to sometimes predict some of these complications. So here's the trick. We have import dataset, and we have something called setting the working directory to a different position. There is one more command I'll show you in a minute, but let's start off with just setting the working directory. Let's say you know where all your files are because you're doing good coding and you've kind of assembled everything into a nice architecture so that it's easy to find and share with people, because the whole goal of this is doing replicatable analyses. So I've maybe done poorly and chosen my downloads folder to be that directory. Don't do that, make it a subdirectory. But for right now, I'm gonna make it that directory. Okay, so just to recap what I just did, I chose the directory, and then that is actually what created this code. So I'm gonna record that code. When that code ran, it changed my working directory, and so we can actually see it right there, that the working directory has changed. It no longer says tilde. It no longer uses that symbol that stands for our home directory. So once I'm here, now I can read, well, let's see what's even in this directory. Yeah, I have a CSV file in there. So this is the file I'm looking for. So I can read .csv, and that works. Cool. We've kind of created a file path. We haven't written the whole path, but we've written enough to direct R to where we wanted it to go. But that's a simple version. What if that was nested inside of some location? Well, we have some tricks to do that. So I'm going to reset my working directory to force us to have to use a more complex file path. Nope, I gotta actually tell it where to go. So I'm gonna tell it to go to my home directory. You'll notice it's back here. So I'm just going to remove, actually, you know what, I'll just reset that to what I just typed, because that's good coding. And cool, so now the goal is, well, how do I get to that file without changing my working directory? It means I'm gonna have to kind of start putting extra code up at the, or text at least, up at the front of the name in order to direct it through my file structures. And this is where some of my tricks come in. So let's go through that. So I would say that the best tool that honestly I've learned, and I had to be real, I didn't know this until recently, is this import dataset tool. That it's really come a long way since some of the first implementations. And so I am importing from a raw text file. So a CSV is a comma separated values file. It's literally just numbers and spaces and commas, where the commas are used to separate things. It can be used to store all sorts of information, not just values. It can be used to store text, although it sometimes can get a little bit weird when your text contains commas. But since it is just a text file, I can use this base R to try and read that table. So to do that, I clicked on the environments pane. I then get a nice pop-up that hopefully you're familiar with from just using computers. And then I can navigate to the file I want to open and just select it. So at this point, what's really cool and what made me excited is that it goes through the parameters that you sometimes need to adjust in order to get a file to open correctly. So in this case, let's say these numbers right here, those are actually just the row names. Like I didn't want them in there as actual values. I wanted them to be used as row names. They're not very good names right now, but let's say I wanted to. I could actually select that as the row name. Now for read.csv, which is the function it will figure out it's going to use, the comma is the default parameter it's looking for delimiting, but you could have files that are tab delimited or semicolon delimited. I actually do sometimes use semicolons because I do use some files that routinely use commas, but by far my most common is comma. The quote is if you are seeing like different ways of quoting strings. And the comment is if there was comment codes left in your file. So I don't have any comment codes left in the file, so I'm just going to say none. Finally, what does it look like when there is missing information? Is it just nothing, or is it NA? By default, it's NA. And finally, this is something that differs between different versions of R, with anything less than 4 having this selected as true. But I really don't like converting strings into factors. And we can kind of talk more about that when we talk about objects, but it's something I really recommend that you generally turn off. So with that, it gives us a nice little preview that it's going to import it like this. It then imports it, and it actually writes the code for us. And this is the really cool thing, is that it's created this line of code, which even if you struggled getting your file path, and let me copy and paste this in the source so that it's formatted a little bit more prettily. Even if you struggle with these file paths, it will build it for you based on your computer's architecture and all formatted correctly. You don't even have to worry about it. I can still go through and I can press tab at different positions and kind of see what was at those positions and what my other options were. But that is the really powerful way for generating through RStudio the file paths. Now there's a couple of other options. That's going to be kind of one of my main suggestions. But the other one that I have historically told students is this file.choose, which when you run, you don't really need to give it any arguments. You can just run the function. But it actually pops up, and I have to go click on it. It pops up an Explore window. And that will allow me to go click on the file I want. So if, for instance, I don't know why I'm using the largest possible icons. Let's go to details. There you go. And if I click on that, you'll see it actually prints out the file path. And so there's a couple of things on this file path to point out. So this file path is a little bit more of a traditional R way, and again is one of the reasons why it's kind of confusing to look at in R. Where it has escaped are backslash symbols. And that's because for R, it thinks in terms of these backslashes when creating file paths. However, Windows does the opposite. Sorry, I said that backwards. Windows expects these backslashes as opposed to the forward slashes. However, in R, a backslash is a special character. It means that the next character should be interpreted in a special way. And so if I just had backslash users, R would be like, okay, backslash, this next letter must be really important. And then it would be like, capital U, what is capital U supposed to be? Actually, capital U may be something, I don't remember. Regardless, I don't want it to try to interpret a capital U. I want it to interpret that backslash as a backslash. And that's why there's 2 backslashes. Now, you don't really need to know that if you know to just use this file.choose and that it will create the name of the path for you. And in fact, if I take that code and I do read.csv on it, it read the CSV file. So I did good. So that's the file.choose method. You'll notice it gives you a slightly different result, but it's still the same thing. It's just formatted in a different way and slightly modified due to that quirk of needing to escape. So the last thing I wanted to point out is that the difference between doing things like this, where I don't mention the name to the file, or where I had, that ./, those are examples of what we would call a relative file path. And that's as opposed to the result of this importation or the result of this file.choose, where I get an absolute file path. And so in these cases, they are from the base of my system. And so on a Windows system, the base of your system is usually the drive letter, or is always the drive letter? Maybe even always, is the drive letter followed by a colon, followed by a, well, Windows wants a \, R wants a /. And so in this case, I can see both of those examples here and here. And that's it. That's the concept for writing file paths in R with like this really good trick. So either file.choose or going through this importation tool. There's a number of other tricks, but those are really robust tools and will help you out of any situation where you're having this issue. So hopefully that helps. And thank you so much for your time. I will see you next time.